So here we are, still here now, sitting together. It's quite curious, isn't it? I don't know what you have been doing today, but this morning I didn't quite get around to doing sitting meditation. I was just doing some standing exercises, but in some valley up in the mountains in Switzerland, and then I was sitting and partly meditating on the train, and then on the airport, and then in the plane, and then in the car in what's supposed to be the worst traffic in Europe. Number one record for Bucharest. And then at home at your place, what's your name again? God, once you're over 40, you start to get these senior moments, you call them in English. And now here, and it's interesting, isn't it? How there's always the you know, in a way, and still that same feeling, no? It's all happening here. It's all happening now. It's just the scenery changes, no? But I'm still, well, certainly still it's the same body apparently sitting here. But yeah, even more subtly the same ever-changing kind of process of consciousness, of course, but with this sense of presence and this kind of simple knowing in the present moment, you know, which is always there. It's just not like this right now. It's like it's changing all the time, isn't it? But this is, I find it's a quite palpable sense of sameness at the same time. You know. Oh, of course. Yeah, you can. I don't know.
Împreună cu schimbarea constantă observăm că există această capacitate de a cunoaște, o cunoaștere care rămâne întotdeauna aceeași și o cunoaștere care se întâmplă întotdeauna în prezent.
And now I might not, you know, be putting that very well, but it certainly has something to do with what's to me the, you know, about the essence of meditation.
Și aici ne apropiem de esența meditației.
Well, do we need translation now or not? There's been more people in coming.
I think it's nice to accentuate because then we lose a lot of stuff, and a lot of times after the talk, sometimes I didn't get that part.
Yeah, okay. No, let's do it. So then you get it twice. And, you know,
exactly. And I shorten it anyway. I give the capsule version.
It's fine. Yeah, that's quite. Yeah, I quite like that. Gives me time to think about what I'm saying. So yes, and about our this topic, no, that George came back suddenly. That George gave me for tonight about meditation and liberation. No?
Și aici ne apropiem de tema din această seară, cum putem înțelege practica meditației și ce ar putea să însemne eliberare.
Because there are many things that you can, you know, do in meditation, and there can be many reasons why people might meditate.
Pentru că meditația poate să însemne foarte multe lucruri și sunt multe motive din care am putea medita.
In the context of the Buddha's teaching, it's certainly aiming at liberation.
Însă dacă luăm contextul învățăturilor lui Buddha, atunci scopul este întotdeauna această eliberare.
And in fact, we might say, well, so but then even then, yeah, liberation from what? Of course, we can also think that there might be lots of things that we might like to liberate ourselves from.
Cum putem înțelege această eliberare? Eliberare de ce? În ce fel eliberare?
So the Buddha was talking about his teaching about liberation from suffering, or dukkha is the Pali word. He was say dukkha and the end of dukkha, or suffering, the end of suffering. That's all he was concerned about in his teaching. What he was talking about.
În textele Pali, când discutăm despre eliberare în termene de eliberare de dukkha. Cum înțelegem dukkha? Înțelegem dukkha ca și insatisfacție, anxietate, suferință.
Now I'm going to translate you. So the dukkha can have many different levels or shades to it. It can mean, in some contexts, can mean like pain, like physical pain, or suffering in the more dramatic sense, to kind of refined levels of basically dissatisfaction or unsatisfactoriness of things or experiences.
Putem găsi multe nuanțe în termenul dukkha, începând de la durere fizică, la durere mentală, psihică, până la nuanțe de insatisfacție și de nemulțumire constantă.
So if you come sometimes maybe across translations of teachings by the Buddha, where the Buddha says that everything that arises is suffering, everything that arises and ceases is suffering. This means in Pali that everything that arises and ceases is dukkha. He didn't mean that everything is misery.
De multe ori găsim traduceri din Pali unde ni se spune că totul este dukkha, însă, bineînțeles, nu înțelegem că totul ar fi suferință.
So what he means is that no experience that we can have through our senses can give us a really lasting fulfillment or perfect kind of satisfaction.
Traducerea mult mai precisă ar fi că nu există nicio experiență la care putem avea parte care ne-ar putea da satisfacție completă.
So in that sense, dukkha is of course also a relative thing, isn't it? It's dukkha in comparison to what's possible.
Și aici vedem acest aspect relativ al insatisfacției vis-a-vis de ceea ce e posibil.
So because the Buddha, the starting point for his career as a teacher, why he started the teaching, is that he precisely said that he had this realization of the possibility of living a life without experiencing any dukkha, any insatisfaction.
Realizarea principală a lui Buddha a fost că există posibilitatea de a trăi fără a avea această experiență de dukkha, de insatisfacție, adică posibilitatea de a trăi fericit.
So in that, of course, whatever he was talking about there, that then, by his own definition, and his teaching is obviously that this cannot be about a particular kind of experience that we can have or something. An experience or a relationship or thing or something cannot give us this kind of perfect, lasting satisfaction.
Atunci înțelegem că în practică nu căutăm o experiență, pentru că toți am înțeles faptul că nicio experiență nu ne poate da satisfacție completă.
For a start, because experiences are impermanent, so they don't last.
Bineînțeles, fiecare experiență e impermanentă, nu are cum să ne dea satisfacție permanentă.
So they are not reliable. In that sense.
Așa nu putem depinde de o experiență.
So in other words, he was talking about a source of contentment, of satisfaction for the mind or for the person, which is completely independent of the external circumstances of our life, whether things are going well or not so well or whatever, according to our preferences or not, even very painful.
Atunci ajungem la noțiunea unei surse de mulțumire, unei surse de satisfacție care este independentă de experiență.
So in other words, the Buddha wasn't talking about dukkha on the level of, for example, physical pain. No, if you're conscious in your body, you're always going to expect there's going to be some physical pain involved in life. That's a given.
Și aici nu folosim noțiunea de dukkha ca și durere fizică, pentru că atâta timp cât avem un corp, nu contează ce s-ar întâmpla, un grad de durere fizică va exista.
So he was talking about not suffering over the pain. For example, physical pain is a very simple example. Not creating any problem around it. Because that's possible. It's possible to have a mind that is completely at peace, completely peaceful, even with very extreme physical pain. That's what he was claiming.
Aici facem o distinție dintre suferință și durere fizică, ideea fiind că putem avea durere fizică fără să existe suferință psihică.
So and that's of course, so it has not something to do with our experience or the quality of our experience, but our relationship to our experience, and how we relate to our experience.
Și aici vedem că ceea ce este important este modul în care relaționăm cu această experiență.
So it has to do with the mind, isn't it? So therefore the Buddhist training, the teaching that the Buddha gave as a path, a spiritual path, is about a training of the mind, about how the mind relates to experience.
Și aici esența antrenamentului este un antrenament al minții, în special al modului în care relaționăm cu orice experiență.
And as most of you, I guess, know, of course, the Buddha did teach much more than meditation, or what he offered is this path. The Buddha didn't say that that usually, for most of us, or whatever, we can just have this realization just through meditation, but he taught a kind of eightfold path, which would encompass a training of the heart, training of the mind, that encompasses all aspects of our life, all aspects of our experience.
Și aici vedem că în tradiție nu este doar vorba despre o practică a meditației, doar un antrenament mental, este vorba despre antrenamentul și deschiderea inimii, atât cât integrarea în toate aspectele vieții.
But meditation certainly plays a very central role within the path, the Buddhist path.
Însă această practică numită meditație este centrală.
And in fact, meditation is, of course, it's a European, the word comes from European language and traditions. The word that the Buddha used for bhavana is probably better translated as cultivation, sort of cultivation of the heart or the mind. Heart and mind, in Eastern traditions like Buddhism is basically the same thing. The Eastern traditions never divided between the heart and the mind.
Cuvântul folosit în textele Pali poate fi tradus mai mult ca și cultivare și nu este vorba doar despre cultivarea minții, este vorba despre cultivarea inimii și a minții care în tradițiile budiste sunt mai mult sau mai puțin același lucru.
Basically meaning our consciousness, how we experience consciousness through our individual experience. You might say mind, on the conceptual level, this refers more to the cognitive aspects, and the heart more to the affective aspect. But in reality, of course, we cognize our experience and we feel our experience, but it's the same. There's the same seed, basically. It's our consciousness, our individual consciousness. That is what we want to try to liberate in Buddhist practice from suffering, from creating suffering around our experience.
Și aici ne referim la modul în care conștiința este manifestată în aceste organisme. Conștiința este manifestată în două feluri, aspectul cognitiv, modul în care percepem lucruri, și aspectul afectiv, modul în care simțim lucruri. Deci vedem că conștiința are ambele aspecte, nu ne referim doar la cogniție și când vorbim despre eliberare, ne uităm la modul în care această conștiință este într-un fel purificată sau într-un fel degajată de obiceiurile care ne fac să intrăm în situații dificile care creează insatisfacție și suferință.
So how do we do that in meditation in the city?
Ok, cum eliberăm această conștiință atunci în meditație?
How do you cultivate? It's actually it's a good thing, and a simple thing that we can start with is precisely kind of physical pain, because almost for everybody, if you sit for long enough, everybody, you will have start to experience some pain or some physical discomfort.
Putem începe în mod direct cu experiența durerii fizice, pentru că, bineînțeles, pentru fiecare, durerea fizică este prezentă într-un grad sau altul când ne așezăm.
So that's very interesting. That's actually not a problem. It doesn't have to be a problem. This doesn't mean that something is going wrong. That gives us something actually an opportunity to very directly observe. And how do we actually relate to this discomfort?
Și știm că această durere este un punct foarte bun de a intra în practică, pentru că putem conștientiza imediat modul în care relaționăm cu durerea fizică care apare în practică.
How much of the suffering that we experience is actually in the physical discomfort, and how much of the suffering is in the mental reaction, or the heart reaction, how we might be struggling with it, or wishing it to be otherwise, or trying to fight against it, trying to get rid of it, or whatever else, our strategies are.
Putem începe prin a observa cât de multă din suferință există în durerea fizică în sine și cât de multă suferință este creată prin activitatea mentală care poate vrea să respingă, poate vrea să schimbe situația.
How does it change? If we experiment, if we manage to change our attitudes, the way we relate to that, disturbing pain that arises while we're trying to be peaceful, sitting here and breathing.
Și putem chiar experimenta cum se schimbă această insatisfacție când schimbăm atitudinea vis-a-vis de durere.
And that is where you see how, why there are so few enlightened people, liberated people. How, on the one hand, it's very simple, actually, and yet on the other hand, it's actually very subtle and very complex, just because our minds and our something misinformed strategies about how we relate to our experience are very complex.
Deși este foarte ușor de discutat, aici putem vedea cât de greu este de pus în practică, pentru că există o mare complexitate în noi, o mare complexitate la nivel mental.
Because disentangling, even starting to see, some of these, the way how we interfere in unhelpful ways with our experience can be quite difficult, actually, to see that, to develop this subtlety of attention, and also then to disentangle some of these patterns can be very, very hard, very long process.
Observăm că toate aceste aspecte ale experienței sunt înodate, sunt într-un fel încurcate în noi. O bună parte din practică are de-a face cu capacitatea de a clarifica experiența, de a înțelege experiența.
Of course, so for start, it sounds very easy or simple. The first truth is that the Buddha was talking about, well, there is suffering, unsatisfactoriness. Most people, when we come to Buddhism, that's something that's, oh yeah, we can relate to that. I know they're suffering. Oh yes, I'm suffering. So, and then, then it's basically the good news. Is the second truth that the Buddha is talking about is that there's a cause for this suffering, and the cause for the suffering. So it's not an external one, but it's in the mind. It's our uninformed relationship. It's basically the addiction to pleasure and our identification, our belief in our aversion, the attachment to aversion. So in believing this movement of the mind of always trying to push away what we dislike and to hold on to or want more of what we feel is nice. And so those two, and then the underlying ignorance that keeps actually this belief going, why we have to keep following kind of these impulses.
Intrarea în practică este întotdeauna foarte simplă, este realizarea faptului că în acest moment există un grad de insatisfacție și, bineînțeles, aceasta este numită prima realizare sau primul adevăr care poate fi experimentat de toată lumea în primul moment sau în primele momente de practică. Bineînțeles, vestea bună este că există și a doua realizare, această insatisfacție are o cauză și cauza este această relație care o avem cu experiența, o relație de multe ori destul de neclară. De ce spunem neclară? Pentru că această relație este bazată pe condiționări care ne duc către atașament vis-a-vis de senzații plăcute și respingerea senzațiilor neplăcute, ambele care au în spate un grad de neștiință sau ignoranță vis-a-vis de propria noastră experiență.
So the recipe for peace then is very simple, and that's you will have heard about that. And also, this is just in English we say let go. That's the third truth. Peace comes from letting go these this greed for what we want, what we feel we need, usually what we feel is pleasant, and this aversion is pushing away of what's unpleasant. Stop believing in this movement, because this movement's never going to be peaceful, because it's never going to end. So just let go. Or as I say, don't be attached. Then it's peace. As Ajahn Chah, the main teacher root teacher, if you like, of our tradition, said, if you want a little peace, just let go a little bit. If you want a lot of peace, then let go a lot. If you want complete peace, then let go completely. Simple. Sounds simple.
Și toți am auzit al treilea adevăr sau a treia realizare, doar dă-i drumul. Toți știm asta, toți am auzit același lucru. Cum spunea Ajahn Chah, dacă dăm drumul puțin, există puțină libertate. Dacă dăm drumul mai mult, există mult mai multă libertate. Și întrebarea este la ce avem nevoie să dăm drumul? La această condiționare neconștientizată care ne îndreaptă către, sau unde există lăcomie pentru senzații plăcute, lăcomie pentru plăcere și în același timp o respingere a senzațiilor neplăcute. În momentul când am putut să dăm drumul la această dinamică, lăcomie, respingere, am găsit un moment de liniște.
But then two problems, isn't it? As usually found. First of all, how do you do that? How do you let go? And secondly, what does it actually mean to let go? What does it actually mean not to be attached? I know so often when I teach retreats, obviously there's always questions about that. People misunderstand what that actually means. So questions come up. It doesn't mean I just become a doormat, I just accept everything, If I don't have any desires anymore, how am I going to be motivated to do anything, Am I supposed to be just some, unfeeling kind of blob, just... It can be quite confusing.
Este această realizare a da drumul care este, deși e foarte cunoscută, toți am auzit despre ceea ce ar putea să însemne a da drumul, când e vorba de a pune în practică, găsim un blocaj, pentru că e foarte greu de a înțelege ce înseamnă să dau drumul la această lăcomie, ce înseamnă să dau drumul la această aversiune. Cum facem lucrul ăsta?
So meditation is a bit like our own laboratory, where you can actually start to experiment and find out in our actual experience what these ideas could possibly mean for us. To get it out from the level of ideas, that we can endlessly talk and argue about, what it might mean or not mean, or whether we agree or disagree, but to take that really into our experience and then really explore for ourselves what the Buddha, or people following his teaching actually might actually mean with those kind of things. How does it actually apply? For example, when I deal with a sore back, or painful knee, how am I unattached? How does it work?
Și aici vedem poate o posibilitate de a explora aceste idei într-un laborator experiențial, care este practica de meditație, care ne scoate din intelectualizare și ne pune față în față cu experiența, unde putem vedea cum pot relaționa cu o experiență dureroasă, o durere în genunchi sau în spate, fără aversiune. Ce înseamnă să relaționez cu o experiență dureroasă fără aversiune?
So, yeah, that's where it then becomes fairly subtle. That's where it comes. Where the idea comes in that actually primarily for what we're doing is we're training the capacity of our attention, of our mind to actually notice things. That's what meditation in that context is primarily about, is to actually really in our experience to find out how our mind works, how the mind works, what attachment actually is, how desire and aversion actually appears in the mind, what it translates to into different kind of thoughts, attitudes, strategies that we have in our life, habits that we build up, how we function, and where the suffering comes in, and to follow that start to actually follow that to the root, where it's actually coming from.
Și aici poate vedem un aspect foarte subtil în meditație, un fel de antrenament, nu numai al atenției, dar un antrenament al capacității de conștientizare, unde începem să vedem cum funcționează mintea, cum se relaționează mintea cu aspecte plăcute ale experienței, cu aspecte neplăcute. Începem să vedem funcționarea minții.
So yeah, I'd like to suggest, that to take this meditation as this kind of project of exploration, really, really to see that as your personal laboratory and as a long-term project to find out how your mind works and how it relates to that, and to presume, of course, we will keep getting it wrong, not to get obsessed about getting it right. And often that's, for example, one of the problems that people get about getting it right, the right technique. Am I doing it right? Which is an aspect of attachment to certainty, or something like that, rather than actually being open to learn from the exploration, from getting it wrong and maybe gradually getting it less wrong. We're always finding out more and more subtle things as our attention becomes more subtle.
Și răspunsul la această întrebare, cum dă drumul, nu vine din înțelegere intelectuală, vine din laboratorul practicii, unde după o perioadă de timp, în momentul când atenția a devenit mai subtilă, capacitatea de conștientizare a devenit mai bună, începem să vedem cum funcționează mintea.
So, for example, I was just trying to start somewhere where many people, most of you start off, maybe, doesn't have to be that way, but yeah, maybe we hear about meditation and we hear that's good for calming the mind, or we might notice it helped our friends or something, so we want to learn about that, and we settle down and to meditate. Maybe we picked up some technique like watching the breath in order to calm our mind, become peaceful. So that's our intention, no?
La început, intenția noastră poate să fie foarte simplă. De exemplu, ne apropiem de meditație pentru că vrem să avem o stare interioară un pic mai calmă. Poate am învățat că trebuie sau că putem centra atenția în senzația respirației, în așa fel încât mintea începe să se calmeze.
And then it doesn't work. The opposite happens. Once we trying to be calm and quiet, we start to really out of control our mind. We just can't stop thinking, thinking all kinds of nonsense. As soon as you make yourself some space, for not engaging your mind in something interesting, then the mind happily kind of says, wow, here's a great space, I'm just going to fill it up with thoughts and wild fantasies, whatever,
Și la început observăm că chiar dacă această intenție ar fi bună sau benefică, practica pur și simplu nu funcționează, pentru că în momentul când dăm puțin spațiu minții, tot felul de alte lucruri încep să apară.
Or the mind might more or less behave or whatever, but then say after a few minutes or whatever, our knees start to kind of scream with pain and disturb our peace of mind. Our body, just doesn't play the game. It doesn't allow us to be peaceful. It disturbs our peace by complaining, by hurting. Actually, it's the mind that complains, isn't it? But the body hurts.
Sau chiar dacă mintea s-a așezat un pic, observăm că apar dureri sau dificultăți la nivel fizic. Spatele, genunchii încep să doară.
And of course, what we notice is we take just the same pattern that we have in daily life, that we have built up our habits. We also, when we start to meditate, we don't suddenly become a different spiritual person. The same person with the same patterns picks up the meditation, and we do the same thing. And the basic thing, of course, yes, I want peace, and I want meditation to be pleasant. And so there it is, right there in front of you. That's attachment, And the thing that don't fit in there, in that scheme, I don't want. I want to push them away. And then I go to the meditation teacher, or to the manual, and I want the trick, the technique, Why doesn't it work for me? What am I doing wrong? What's the technique to make my mind peaceful? Because that's what I want. Because it's pleasant.
Și bineînțeles, chiar în acel moment apar tiparele vechi, condiționările vechi, care spun, ok, eu nu vreau să am de-a face cu experiențe dureroase, eu vreau o experiență plăcută, liniștită și începem să căutăm ca și cum ar exista un fel de truc sau un fel de tehnică care ar putea să ne separe de experiență.
And that's normal. No, actually, we just, the first thing that we can learn from that, if you really invest in being in attention and the natural intelligence of our mind means, just paying attention to actually learn something or experience, if you see, oh yeah, that's how it is, isn't it? So that's the untrained mind, how it works. Want pleasure and don't want discomfort. And of course, the same I want from my spiritual practice, from meditation, only important parts, spiritual pleasure.
Și aici vedem încă o dată repetiția acestor condiționări vechi, unde aducem din viața de zi cu zi aceleași dorințe, aceeași proiecție, unde căutăm aceleași plăceri, dar acum în practica de meditație.
So the real where the freedom comes in is initially certainly it's probably for most of us counterintuitive to certainly how our mind ordinarily works.
Putem observa aici că libertatea sau senzația de eliberare este contraintuitiv. Vedem că este chiar împotriva direcției în care funcționează mentalul nostru.
Because it's not about deciding that now I'm going to be unattached, because I realize attachment is suffering, so now I'm just detached, then I'm detached, and then I'm not suffering about anything.
Bineînțeles, nu este vorba de a decide, ok, acum sunt detașat pentru că nu vreau să fiu atașat, lucrul ăsta chiar nu funcționează.
So the mind that is not liberated, the mind that hasn't yet been trained or hasn't had the crucial insights that shift things, just is sticky by nature. It means it does attach to things. Things do attach to it. That's just its nature. It's always going to be like that. We cannot just decide to stop that.
Mintea care nu este antrenată, mintea la toată lumea, este foarte sticky, adică are capacitatea de a se agăța de obiecte, de experiențe. Asta e natura minții.
So then maybe when we realize that, we realize actually a lot already, because then we notice we have to actually be quite subtle in our way how we actually go about this. We need to actually learn to cooperate with this sticky mind.
Deci când am văzut acest lucru, este o realizare importantă pentru că înțelegem că trebuie să lucrăm la un nivel destul de subtil, pentru că natura minții este să se agațe de obiecte, este să se agațe de experiențe.
And that's where practice, meditation practice also becomes very personal, very individual, because we are so different. Well, on some level we are actually very similar, and yet there's quite a lot of variation on the theme, aversion and desire, how our personalities get structured around those, and how they keep getting us into trouble. So that's very interesting. That's actually we find out over the long run. Don't necessarily expect to solve any of these things quickly, but to find out more about the particular style of your personal delusions, of your personality, about how you go about trying to solve this conundrum, this problem. That's very interesting. That's what we need to learn about.
E foarte interesant că după un timp vedem că nu căutăm imediat o soluție la aceste lucruri, ci căutăm să înțelegem care este stilul nostru nevrotic, adică care este patternul nostru cu care lucrăm vis-a-vis de lăcomie și de aversiune. Și aici vedem că această practică de cultivare este o practică foarte personală. Nu este un pattern care îl putem aplica la toată lumea și este foarte bazată pe capacitatea fiecăruia de a lucra în acest laborator cu sine.
So that's where, that's not something that we can just really exhaust as a topic. Obviously, that's you realize it becomes a very big topic. That's not something you can kind of fill out in the evening talks of a whole meditation retreat about that. And that's always quite interesting to often in interviews or talk to individual questions about some of these things, because there's such a variety. But that is, for example, then we go about these things in very different ways. Some of us are very willful. We have maybe a lot of willpower, and then you can really try to use that initially to really force the mind into sticking to the meditation object and carve out a piece of quiet or something, for example. You can do that.
Aceasta este o temă foarte amplă, dar putem vedea aici că fiecare dintre noi are un stil foarte specific și putem observa dacă avem stilul în care forțăm meditația, adică folosim voință sau putere să spunem ok, acum sunt foarte centrat, aici rămân cu atenția.
For some people that might never work right from the beginning, depending on what kind of, how your mind works. But say for some people that it might work, so you pick up a technique and you can get quite good at it, at using a technique to really kind of keep your mind focused on that, and you might get some initially quite good experiences of really the mind getting fairly quiet because it really sticks to your meditation object, and that might be quite exciting at the beginning or satisfactory.
Pentru unele persoane, bineînțeles, a forța o tehnică nu funcționează absolut deloc, dar pentru alte persoane, dacă putem, folosim puterea minții pentru a stabiliza atenția într-o tehnică și vedem că prin această forțare, prin această putere, putem să găsim un oarecare grad de calm și de echilibru.
But, for example, this is just one example that I'm picking out to illustrate. Then, at some point, hopefully, you will notice that maybe there's still there's a tension in there, because it depends on you being kind of maintaining this control of your mind, keeping your mind controlled around there and this, and there's a more subtle level of dukkha, of suffering there, which is this tension.
Și observăm că în momentul când chiar am aplicat tehnica cu forță și chiar am putut centra atenția, există un grad de tensiune, există un grad de instabilitate de dedesubtul tehnicii, care este un grad de insatisfacție, un grad de suferință subtilă care a fost creat.
So, and at some point then you might then have to look at this tension and how you can actually relax this tension, and for example, then you might just feel whenever you relax, and the mind goes all over the place again. So then, how do I go from there? How can I get the mind to quiet down without actually forcing it? Just an example, as some progression that can happen.
Și în acest exemplu să presupunem că devenim conștienți de faptul că există această tensiune care se ascunde sub tehnică. În momentul când am devenit conștienți de faptul că există tensiune, vedem, ok, cum am putea relaxa mintea, cum am putea relaxa atenția. Și ce se întâmplă dacă relaxăm și pierdem obiectul, atunci am pierdut meditația, cât de multă relaxare trebuie să existe, cât de multă forță trebuie aplicată. E doar un exemplu, dar ne dă un fel de idee despre cum ar putea să progreseze un fel de practică la nivel individual.
Yeah, or even without attention, you might be quite able to settle your mind, when you have your space of meditation, settle down on the breath or something and absorb in quite quiet and peaceful spaces. It's less common with kind of modern Westerners and now even Asian people more because we tend to have a quite over-educated kind of critical thinking, busy mind. But some people are able to just get into very peaceful, beautiful kind of collected kind of spaces of attention. Samadhi, we call it in Buddhism, like also in yoga. People who practice yoga, maybe with breathing techniques and all that.
Pentru unele persoane, mult mai rar, observăm că există însă capacitatea de a calma mintea în mod natural și de a intra într-o stare plăcută.
And a very nice way of getting, if you've got problems, like talking about physical pain. I remember a friend was coming to our monastery in England, was living in England, was talking about that, who learned meditation with a samadhi technique and became very good at it and was quite good at that. And he had physical problems and pains, but with his technique he could just go right past it and really go into kind of a peaceful space where all the pain and discomfort would just disappear.
Și știm că folosind aceste tehnici, când mintea devine foarte clară, foarte calmă, foarte relaxată, putem trece dincolo de orice durere fizică. Asta e foarte bine știut.
But then at some point he realized, at first he was very happy, of course, it was very nice, and maybe even got a bit proud about being very good at meditation. But then he started to realize that he's actually starting to use this capacity to basically just avoid pain and discomfort. He could just absorb into this beautiful space, but then what? Then he would just, it's like, finding a nice parking for your car, and you just park it there for a while, but then at some point he had to come out of it again, and then there was the pain again, and the difficulty.
Și vedem că există posibilitatea de a folosi un astfel de tehnică pentru a ignora tot felul de dificultăți la nivel fizic. Și la ce ne servește faptul că ne putem duce într-un spațiu care este plăcut, liniștit, frumos, și când revenim înapoi la experiența corpului, durerile sunt prezente.
So he would never actually really investigate and challenge his basic relationship to pain or the discomfort. He just learned an ability to actually, not in this case, maybe not, I don't know, I can't read his mind, but I think not necessarily by forcing his mind somewhere else, but just an ability to place his attention on something else, and so for a while at least absorbing into the pleasure. But it prevented him from actually to more deeply investigate his basic relationship to experience. He just learned a trick which worked for him. So then he realized that that's the benefit even of the tricks that he learned, in the end turned out to be a limitation for him as well, because he didn't develop much wisdom.
Și chiar aceste stări focalizate, clare, stări foarte plăcute, sunt stări care, într-un fel, ne desprind de experiență. Și această desprindere de experiență, bineînțeles, ne rupe de posibilitatea de a relaționa cu tot câmpul experienței. Și fără o relație directă cu câmpul experienței, nu putem dezvolta niciun grad de înțelegere. Deși stările în care suntem sunt foarte plăcute, suntem desprinși de experiență.
So he just developed another capacity of creating more pleasure. And a pleasure that's more safe in a way, because it's more own created through his own efforts, not depending on so much on external circumstances. So, if you're like the spiritual pleasure, if you want to call it like that, but he didn't learn through that how to actually find freedom, from dependency on the quality of experience. He basically, it would still feed into the same mechanism, which the Buddha certainly said is actually the root cause of our suffering. We're still basically feeding into the desire of the mind for having pleasure and rejecting discomfort.
Și aici vedem din nou doar manifestarea aceluiași mecanism care ne duce către căutarea stărilor plăcute în practica de meditație, adică folosim practica de meditație pentru a genera stări de plăcere care, ok, în sine nu nimic greșit, dar vedem că există un fel de dependență de a genera o experiență care să ne dea oarecare satisfacție, oarecare plăcere, și asta clar nu are nimic de a face cu libertatea.
So, and others of us might have the feeling we never even get there, it's always, the mind never actually manages to even kind of vaguely settle, because they're always either kind of, the body or the mind is all this kind of pressures, and then we get the feeling that we can't meditate or something, because we can't, sit kind of still and blissful like some other people apparently do. And then you feel, what to do, kind of desperate, trying another technique, and the mind just doesn't. Some minds just don't like techniques, So at some point we're just going to have to maybe realize that and just, try something else. Some minds are incredibly rebellious, and if you just tell them to do something, they just won't. The most sure thing is they won't do what you tell them to do.
Da, majoritatea dintre noi însă nu au problema de a se atașa de aceste stări plăcute, pentru că suntem întotdeauna în stări de disatisfacție, corpul doare, mintea este foarte dispersată. Plus, trebuie să înțelegem că o bună parte din noi nu pot aplica tehnici stricte pentru meditație.
So that's where we have to, that's why I'm saying laboratory. We have to learn, find out about ourselves. And that's where it becomes quite subtle, because these techniques, of course, they can be very useful. No? And being able to focus your mind is obviously a tool, has its benefits, and the Buddha proposed that and recommended that. Being able to actually calm the mind and getting into kind of blissful, peaceful internal states, that's all, first of all, I mean, it's blameless, it's very beautiful, and it's also has its uses. But part of its use is it can refresh the mind, gives the mind more energy, and inner stability. But at some point, and that's sometimes that's what most people find somewhat interestingly most difficult. We have to turn that, whatever concentration or samadhi or we are able to master, whether it's a lot or a little bit, we're going to have to turn it to investigation, to see what's actually really going on here, and how am I responsible for creating my own suffering? Which is something that we all tend to be very lazy about. It's much easier to blame, somebody else for our suffering.
Și aici nu contează cât de multă concentrare avem sau cât de plăcută este starea în care suntem. Bineînțeles, ajută ca mintea să fie focalizată, concentrată, ajută ca starea în care suntem să fie plăcută, pentru că asta aduce energie și un grad de satisfacție. Însă ceea ce este important este posibilitatea de a deschide atenția și de a direcționa atenția către întreaga experiență. Pentru că este doar în momentul când suntem în contact cu întreaga experiență, începem să înțelegem.
So, and I think, well, I'll try. In brief and in essence, so there's these two things, basically, in formal meditation, in this context that we try to do. That's why it's, first of all, I was saying, it's a cultivation, a training of attention. We try to train our attention.
Sunt două aspecte care le putem sumariza. În primul rând este acest antrenament al atenției, care este partea de bază din meditație.
So that's what this, the Pali word sati, or what these days you hear more and more about, mindfulness, it's more popular. This about, being actually present, being actually fully here with which is what is happening. And that's why I was saying, like in the guided meditation, that's what we use the body for. Because the body, if you're with the body, you know that we are here, isn't it? The body anchors us in the actually presence of in the actuality of our experience. That's why always this boring exercise, basically to always keep bringing back the attention to the body.
Practica atenției este numită sati în Pali, bineînțeles în ziua de astăzi. Acest termen a fost tradus ca și mindfulness și această atenție este întotdeauna antrenată folosind prezența corpului.
And so that's a natural quality that we all have, isn't it? If you're conscious, that's the thing. There's some kind of presence here, I hope, for what I see that seems to be, here. If you're conscious, then there's some knowing basically there, that something is going on. It's very basic.
Toți suntem conștienți, conștiința înseamnă prezență, este un factor natural pentru toată lumea.
So that can be trained, but in what sense? As the first of all, we recognize this quality in consciousness, the basic just knowing, which is just an acknowledging that it's like this right now, whatever that is. It doesn't have to be, the ultimate perfect clear perception of what this really means. It's not about that, but it's like this right now, some.
Și cultivarea aici începe cu pur și simplu recunoașterea acestei stări de conștiință. Ce înseamnă să fiu conștient? Ce înseamnă să fiu prezent? Bineînțeles, toți suntem conștienți, toți suntem prezenți, dar ce înseamnă să putem cultiva această conștientizare?
So it gives us a bit of, I don't know, it's this quality of being present with what you're doing, isn't it? It's a difference, like if you're doing some repair work at home and you're nailing something on the wall, and you are there with what you're doing, or whether you're absorbed in already how this is going to look like when it's finished, and how you're going to invite your friends and show them the wonderful thing that you're doing. You know the difference, isn't it? Which is often that makes a lot of difference to your thumb. No, it's that. That's what it is.
Această prezență, această capacitate de conștientizare este găsită în lucruri simple. De exemplu, când iau un ciocan și vreau să bat un cui, are un grad de atenție prezentă, știe ce face.
And so the first thing, of course, but you can train that, of course, and by this meditation exercise, the thing is we train that in various ways, isn't it? I think there's one thing is we try to learn to have that a bit more often, the presence, and to maintain it a bit more, to have a bit more of constancy in that.
Deci, în practica de meditație, recunoaștem această calitate a prezenței și observăm că o putem face să dureze un pic mai mult, o putem face să țină.
And then I think there's an element, I mean, there might be many, I mean, I'm just making this up a little bit now, but you might say the subtlety, the capacity of this presence, because like right now, we might be present, and we might feel a certain kind of presence, but I mean, the content of information potentially in this situation at any moment is infinite, isn't it? I mean, how much of what is going on right now are we actually present for? That can be quite dramatically different, and we might all have a bit of an experience. In ordinary, even without meditation, we know that the quality of our presence can be quite different. It's suddenly much more present, and we actually process much more information, so that's a difference.
Al doilea lucru la care putem lucra este calitatea acestei prezențe. Știm că există poate o cantitate nelimitată de informație. Întrebarea este cu cât din această experiență, din această informație putem fi prezenți.
And then also maybe there's something like a strength or resilience of this presence decides how easily does it collapse, or how when the content gets a bit more agitated. Like we might be very present while we're doing our homework, what's our DIY, but then whatever, our daughter comes in and says something naughty to us, or annoys us, and then some emotional stuff comes up, and immediately all the presence is gone, and we are just totally identified with our emotion and just blurt out some whatever insult or whatever.
Al doilea aspect este cât de puternică este această prezență, cât de rezilientă este această prezență, cât de nezdruncinată este această prezență.
So that's something like this is just this exercise, on why we're using, like for example, one could expand on that, but it's not the time for it. Why we use the body and the breath, something for a start usually not particularly interesting, until we really connect with the breath. It's something a training about, this is almost like going to the gym and training your muscles, You're training the muscle of attention in these various ways. How much you're learning to be actually present with the body, how much what actually start to pick up, what's actually happening in the body, what's happening in the mind. Just by keeping doing this, and sometimes it's not that obvious. This muscle of attention gets stronger, and we start to actually be more capable of just staying present and also seeing more in what we are actually present for. That sometimes can be a dramatic shift, but particularly in terms of our general kind of whole life experience, it's often kind of a gradual kind of process.
Antrenamentul acestei atenții este ca antrenamentul unui mușchi și meditație în acest laborator. Bineînțeles, am văzut că folosim experiența corpului, observând nu numai gradul de prezență, dar și calitatea acestei prezențe. Cât de subtilă este atenția, cât de multă informație putem capta din experiența din momentul de față.
And so that gradually, hopefully you will find it does of course sometimes take time or whatever, but it will permeate also your experience when you're not sitting on a meditation cushion. So this is the same as if you do the gym and you train your muscles, you don't leave them behind in the gym. When you go, hopefully that's the whole point, isn't it? You become more physically fit, and you're then if suddenly there's a heavy weight you need to lift, you've got actually the power to do that. That's the same idea as one of our teachers used to say. I mean, people think this is practice, but this is not the practice. This is just preparation. Practice is, when you go out there and somebody, is cutting you off on the road or something, or insulting you, how quickly do you actually get yourself, the autopilot, the automatic emotional reaction. How quick you actually are in catching yourself. Can you be actually present then for what is coming up? That's practice.
Alt aspect al practicii este conștientizarea că aceste resurse devin disponibile în mod natural când avem nevoie de ele. În momentul când ele au fost cultivate în laboratorul meditației, când mușchii au devenit mai puternici, nu avem nevoie să facem nimic specific, resursele devin disponibile când avem nevoie de ele.
So, and that's what I think where in our direct experience, like in our meditation, our practice, we can discover, or I think, or find where this liberation, this possibility of liberation from suffering lies that the Buddha was talking about, to take it from the level of ideas to our experience, in this capacity of awareness, of just remaining aware and knowing, staying present and knowing, this is happening right now.
Și acum putem reveni la noțiunea de eliberare și putem vedea că această noțiune de eliberare este foarte strâns legată cu capacitatea de conștientizare, capacitatea de a fi prezenți cu orice experiență ar putea să apară.
So, it's very concrete, no? That's what was like in the guided meditation was talking about, like this. It's a metaphor, if you like, but it's like this space-like quality of awareness. If you pay attention, we notice all the sensations. We start with the body, the breath, and we notice that the body takes up space, isn't it? It's like a field of sensations. And obviously it takes up physical space, as we know here. But very directly, if we just with our attention to experience, it's a mental space, isn't it? In which this space actually appears, like the body appears, all those sensations.
În meditație ne conectăm cu această experiență, observând că experiența corpului este ca o experiență a unui spațiu, nu este experiența imaginii corpului, nu vedem o mână, un picior sau trunchiul. Corpul apare în experiența ca spațiu, ca senzație.
So that's what's often quite interesting at some point to really, if you use, for example, the body, the breath, that's often introduced at the end of the meditation to open up the focus and include things like sounds. Sounds are very good for that, So like this, was a police car, whatever came past, whatever it is.
Și în spațiul experienței putem acomoda sunete, tot felul de alți stimuli.
Where does that sound actually appear? When we meditate, when we sit there, where is the sound?
Și putem întreba unde apare sunetul.
We project, of course, from our, from what we learn, from our, our conceptualization of things, our perception. Yeah, that's the car. It's out there. It's out there.
Putem conceptualiza și spunem că este sunetul unei mașini care este undeva în exterior.
But in our direct, actual experience, like how it is, from the standpoint of consciousness or awareness, but it's more clear when we close our eyes and feel our body, this sound appears, of course, in the same space as the physical sensations. It's here.
Și când ne raportăm la experiență, observăm că sunetul, corpul, toate senzațiile apar în același spațiu, în spațiul care este caracterizat prin noțiunea de aici.
And even the thoughts, it's in the same space. They all they're kind of mixed together in this mental space, which is prior to the physical space. Even the physical space appears in the mental space. That's why I say space-like. It's kind of space-like kind of quality.
Și prin această noțiune de spațiu ne putem apropia de noțiunea conștiinței, de aspectul de spațiu legat de conștiință.
And that's when we get it, when we recognize that and get a sense for that, and you can see how much can we actually stay in touch with that perception or whatever of this space-like quality, to maintain that space. When does it close down? If you're there with our experience in the body, and then suddenly something comes up. And we feel the breath or something, and then, for example, physical pain comes up, or a thought, a horrible thought, or a horrible sound. When can we actually maintain that experience of just space and just knowing, this is a sound, this is a thought, or when do we actually get When does this space, freedom disappears when that space collapses. That's my how do you call it? My theory or whatever, my statement. Say, and you start to actually react to that, and then the mind proliferates about it, and you get lost in the experience.
Această experiență de spațiu este experiența libertății. Și în momentul când spațiul a implodat, când spațiul s-a condensat într-un gând sau într-o senzație, am pierdut libertatea. Deci putem fi foarte atenți la spațialitatea experienței, la deschiderea experienței, o experiență deschisă care poate să acomodeze multe aspecte, este o experiență relativ liberă, o experiență condensată care a implodat într-un obiect, este o experiență în care libertatea s-a pierdut.
Yeah, when that happens, what you notice is there's no freedom, because then it's just the autopilot basically. It's our past conditioning that just acts out its mechanical thing basically, acts out its predictable, depending how much you know the person, the more it's predictable. The reaction which is conditioned by the past, and some of these conditionings sometimes are luckily adequate enough and that function well in this situation, and sometimes they are not. But we have no choice. It just the stimulus comes and boom comes the reaction, because we are not able to maintain the space.
Și când libertatea s-a pierdut, am intrat în condiționarea karmică, the karmic conditioning, we could say, în care ceea ce apare este o formulă din trecut. Cum relaționez cu acest eveniment, cu această experiență, nu am cum să știu, apare doar formula care este inconștientă și funcționează la nivel automat.
If I can maintain this awareness, this space like knowing kind of quality, noticing, this is coming, if I know this is coming up, wherever I catch it, I might notice just something, it might not even trigger anything, or I notice, I recognize there's a trigger point, my button is being pushed, but I still have perspective, I'm still aware this is happening. To the extent that I can maintain that, then suddenly I have choices. Rather than reacting, I can respond.
Libertatea presupune capacitatea de a cunoaște nu numai stimulul, dar de a vedea momentul în care reacția sau formula apare. În momentul când am putut vedea și reacția, în acel moment avem posibilitatea de alegere. Apar opțiuni. Și în aceste opțiuni găsim noțiunea de libertate.
And remember, it's not about being perfect. I mean, obviously, still, even if I can maintain for some, this presence, and I realize, something, I can start to actually see. Then I actually kind of can start. That's when I can start to see more subtle things and complex things. I can start to see my patterns coming up. And if I don't fall into the identification of them, if I can maintain this perspective, some people call it like taking the step back. So it's not literally, of course, taking a step back. You're right there. But you're more like the space than the content, It's approximation, let's say. But so, if you see that, well, your response, whatever you come up with, it might still not be perfect what's the standard anyway, if you're not enlightened yet, but at least there's a possibility, isn't it? There's an opening. We can actually start to use reflective qualities. Suddenly there's an opening to creativity, to find out, this is what my automatic response would be, what I would have always done in the past, but what I've actually learned, maybe I know, part of me knows that maybe this is perhaps not the most fruitful kind of way. Do I have other options? Then I can start to try out different things, and I'm going to learn something new.
Toate aceste momente ne prezintă oportunitatea unor deschideri. Unor deschideri care sunt posibile în fiecare moment în care am găsit această deschidere, acest spațiu și putem vedea, chiar dacă nu suntem perfecți, putem vedea ce opțiuni ar putea să apară. De multe ori vorbim despre posibilitatea a lua un pas în spate, dar, bineînțeles, asta e doar o metaforă, pentru că spațiul nu este separat de obiect, suntem chiar acolo. Deci, chiar dacă folosim metafora, acum am luat un pas în spate, Nu este vorba de a ne desprinde de experiență, pentru că, încă o dată, nu există niciun fel de distanță între spațiu și conținut.
That was a bit too long. I lost my thread now.
There's no distance between.
Yeah. But, what was going to say? So that's where you can also then start to see, well, this is pattern. You see this movement or this thing about the different levels or ways of attachment to different forms of what we feel is kind of desirable or pleasurable, or the aversion to things that we don't like, our preferences, how it works for us. Because there are so many levels and possibilities, once the mind is sticky, realize it happens on all levels of our experiences. So it's not just about being attached to chocolate cake or vanilla ice cream or something, or a particular person or sex or comfort, or it's also its opinions and views about how to do things, or self-view, my self-image, that I have. It can even be things that are painful, the way that I see myself, and when things gets challenged, how that kind of jolts us, out of familiarity, whatever.
Deci apare posibilitatea de a vedea diferite aspecte ale experienței, modul în care relaționăm cu experiența, de ce suntem atașați, unde există lăcomii, unde există aversiuni, de ce este nevoie de această conștientizare, de această vedere, pentru că vederea pattern-urilor sau condiționărilor clarifică. E foarte simplu. În momentul când am început să vedem, experiența se clarifică. Când suntem în experiență, experiența este opacă.
No, and that is really the key to investigation. No, if we trust actually that our mind is naturally, it has natural intelligence. No, I mean, this is not even something you can make it in some kind of mystical or religious kind of thing, but even in a very mundane way. I mean, obviously that's how we are wired, isn't it? If our mind wouldn't be naturally intelligent, we would never learn anything. So that's what you see with little babies. Isn't it? That's how we start, because our mind is naturally curious and it has a natural intelligence. It's curious, it wants to know, and also has the capacity to know. That's something that's always there.
Această conștientizare este posibilă pentru că există o calitate naturală de inteligență în noi.
So just practicing this awareness, being present and trusting, that if you're really present and really pay attention to what's happening, obviously with an interest to learn from our experience, then what our attention does, it feeds information to the mind, to its natural intelligence, and we can trust that we're going to start to see things, and we're going to start to have insights. We don't have to force it, we don't have to try hard and think something out, and that's off, so far.
Deci, încă o dată, nu este vorba doar despre a direcționa și a antrena atenția. Acest lucru este însă făcut cu intenția de a investiga experiența. În momentul când intenția de a investiga, de a înțelege experiența este prezentă, începem să primim informație din experiență, începem să primim cunoaștere din experiență și încă o dată este această cunoaștere care ne duce către posibilitatea deschiderii.
So that's why often I find that people with meditation get confused about that, because in the Buddha always talked about that. So this is like first you develop presence, mindfulness, and then investigation of dhammas. And then people get confused, how am I supposed to investigate in meditation? Just a very common question.
Și aici este marea confuzie, pentru că, știm că există aceste două aspecte în meditație. Am auzit că există partea de calmare sau concentrare a atenției.
Presence. I was talking about presence.
Presence?
I wasn't talking about calm.
Presence and calm and concentration.
No. Presence and investigation.
But I was getting to investigation.
Okay. Yeah. But I wasn't saying anything about calming. Concentration.
So, două aspecte, una de concentrarea atenției, aducerea atenției către un obiect și al doilea de investigare. Și de multe ori întrebarea este cum folosim al doilea aspect de investigare, cum se întâmplă al doilea aspect.
It's because we think, investigation means thinking about things, isn't it? That's what I learned at school. And so here I'm meditating. I thought I should stop thinking. I want to be peaceful. I want to be calm. And naturally, most of us, we feel, we are bothered by our mind is thinking too much. So I want to find out for it to shut up so that I have peace. And now then, how do I investigate?
Deci, în practică, atâta timp cât mentalul nu este centrat, întrebarea apare, cum investighezi, crezând că este un proces de intelectualizare, un proces conceptual.
And there are two misunderstandings in here, isn't it, that we already need to learn about. First of all, meditation is not just about calming the mind.
Sunt două misconcepții, două înțelegeri greșite. În primul rând, meditația nu este doar despre a calma mintea.
There are very different kinds of calm, and they can be quite dangerous if you're not very clear about that. If you just have maybe an even unacknowledged intention of just being calm, trying to be calm, and then also if you just think that's about not thinking, you might actually, even if you manage in the end, just getting the mind into a calm place, but it might just be, calm, all right, but there's no light on, so it's just, you might as well just go to sleep. That's calm too, It's more comfortable. And that can be a place where we can be stuck for a long time, because we haven't gone past the idea of just trying desperately to calm the mind, and then suddenly, finally, you manage, but then you're stuck in that calm. It's just nothing happening anymore. You just doesn't, it's not necessarily bright.
Când nu am înțeles ce înseamnă a calma mintea, putem intra într-o stare de somnolență, unde după ce am încercat foarte, foarte mult să ne așezăm, ne-am așezat și acum suntem într-o stare de somnolență, dar nu este nicio lumină prezentă.
So calm is of course good. It's certainly better than being, desperate all the time, obviously. And also, but calm in the sense of the Buddhist teaching, the right calm, right samadhi, right collectedness, always has sati there. It means it's always present. So it means it's the idea of the mind being settled, not being all over the place, but being quite aware, being present, knowing what's going on. If that's not there, then you're out of balance. There's not enough energy there in the practices. You have to remember to keep the light on.
Când vorbim aici despre calm, avem nevoie să avem acest aspect de sati, de prezență, de conștientizare, unde există calm, dar există și un grad de lumină.
And the second misunderstanding is that, of course, investigation doesn't necessarily mean thinking. Remember the trust that there's natural intelligence in mind operating. So if the light is on, we see things. And then, if the light really is on, if we see things and the mind is calm, we might well see things that we haven't seen before. Or we see things in a different way. But we have to actually, and that's part of the trick of how to keep the light on, we have to keep this interest going. We have to invest in this curiosity of the mind, to really wanting to learn from our experience. Not just being calm, but really to learn. Then, if you have that, then calm is good, as long as this curious kind of child, is still there, that wants to find out what's happening. That's not wrong. Don't try and shut that one down.
Și al doilea aspect, investigarea nu este un proces intelectual, nu este un proces conceptual, nu este un lucru care este gândit. Observăm că în momentul când mintea este așezată, calmă, există un grad de cunoaștere, un grad de lumină în câmpul conștiinței care poate primi informație direct, fără să intrăm într-un proces de conceptualizare.
So if we keep these things kind of alive and going and keep going with that, then we make our own discoveries. We find out, for example, the thing with the pain, let's say just a simple physical pain that bothers us, just by being interested in there and working on this equilibrium of energy and idea of calm and clarity and curiosity about that we find out from ourselves what we're actually doing that is creating suffering out of physical pain, for example. We don't need to read it in a book or somebody tell us. We actually find out in our experience where we're doing it and where we can actually stop doing something so that at least part of our suffering is going to disappear.
Și când aceste aspecte sunt ambele împreună, aspectul de claritate și focalizare și această capacitate de investigare naturală, non-conceptuală, începem să înțelegem. Începem să înțelegem natura experienței și în special modul în care creăm dificultate pentru noi înșine, modul în care creăm insatisfacție, suferință pentru noi înșine și în momentul în care am înțeles modul în care ne creăm insatisfacție și suferință, apare posibilitatea de a da drumul.
And that's how we grow, and how also actually that capacity, that strength of our awareness grows. We find that whenever we can actually undo some of these knots in our mind, in our attitudes, patterns that have been created, and we really see through some of those and can actually release some of them, we recuperate the energy basically that has been locked in there, and that becomes available for presence, for being actually more present. Presence will become more of a lived experience.
Și acesta este un proces prin care literalmente creștem, pentru că în momentul în care am putut să vedem în aceste patternuri, am început să eliberăm energie care este blocată în aceste patternuri. Și este energie care devine disponibilă pentru conștientizare. Devenim mai prezenți.
And that's very beautiful. And that's the whole aspect. Another aspect that I have not really touched on it. I've talked more on the cognitive aspect, really. I was saying about the cognitive and the affective aspect of the mind-heart. You know? We find it's very beautiful because it has an affective quality, this presence. So that makes also in our practice a difference. The paying attention to the quality of our attention that we offer our experience, our body.
Și în același timp, deși nu am discutat prea mult, dar foarte important, observăm că această prezență are o calitate afectivă. Se simte într-un fel, are o calitate afectivă foarte specifică.
So like if we are attending, whether it's we are attending to our breath with our technique or working with some pain that is, intruding our space, are we impatient? Are we trying to prove something? Are we trying to become the best meditator? Or are we worried about getting it right? Or are we actually kind to our own experience? Makes a huge difference. 5 people doing the same technique, of doing, counting your breath or something like that. But the attitude behind it, the quality, whether you do it with kindness or with being with an overcritical mind or an obedient mind, trying to be a good disciple or whatever, whatever we've got inside, that makes a huge difference. And it has to do with the affective quality, of course, of our awareness. And that also gets liberated, of course, in the process. Whenever we see, the affective patterns, and whenever we see that there's something that actually messes up our inner well-being that we don't actually need to do anymore, when we actually can drop it, more of this affective quality becomes liberated as well, becomes available.
Deci când lucrăm cu această prezență în experiență, învățăm să fim foarte atenți la calitatea afectivă a experienței, oricare ar fi calitatea afectivă. Fie că calitatea afectivă este una de nerăbdare sau una de bucurie sau de tristețe, nu contează. Învățăm să fim foarte atenți la modul în care relaționăm cu experiența la nivel afectiv.
So you might well say the freedom that possible for the heart is actually the freedom, the capacity to feel. Somebody one spiritual teacher once called it like, ultimate freedom is kind of the ability for limitless feeling without putting any limitations on our feeling. It means we're not afraid of life, of experiences, not of physical pain, not of emotions. We have space there's space in the heart for it. So it means we can receive feeling, pleasant feeling. It's not so. We learn that not having desire doesn't mean that we can't allow any pleasure, but we don't need the pleasure for our contentment, so we don't have to try and hold on to it, or manipulate it. We can acknowledge it, that it's pleasant, like in a meditation, and that's it. We don't expect more from it than what it can give, and at the same time, we don't need to contract around what's unpleasant. The heart can stay open. Then we are maximum responsive, actually, to life. And you stay a heart like that, which has no obstacles, which is no internal blocks, so it's kind of totally open. It can allow itself to be totally vulnerable to feeling. It's not reactive. No, it's naturally kind, and it's naturally compassionate, and it's naturally joyful. And well, by definition, is equanimous. No? Again, that's different. It doesn't mean being indifferent. No? Sometimes we think, freedom comes, so we don't have to feel anything anymore, and then we are peaceful. No, it means just the opposite. We can feel everything, but it's not going to overwhelm us because there's so much space, so much capacity, that we can just feel, oh, this hurts, and that's it. But there's no reaction. Now that's very tall order, of course, but we can maybe get a bit of a taste of it from our experience early on. That's what inspires us to keep going in that direction. Something we can learn.
Și aici ne apropiem de noțiunea de libertate, nu prin distanțarea de afectivitate sau de sentiment, ci prin deschiderea completă către orice sentiment, către orice stare afectivă. Mai precis, către capacitatea de a simți stări dureroase, fără respingere, și capacitatea de a simți plăcere, fără lăcomie.
And so that's kind of maybe the goal there at the back, it's something. But we can confirm that, we just see that and remember that in our own meditation, our own humble kind of efforts, to check our understanding, our intention, because so often it is naturally that we feel, I still operate like that, or people come to me after meditation, oh, I had a really good meditation. What do you think what it means? For most people, it means it was really pleasant. Right? Or I say, oh, this was terrible meditation, just didn't work at all. It meant that the mind was restless or the body was hurting. But that's not really what a good or bad meditation is about. The question is, did you get lost if you got lost in the pleasure, then it wasn't a good meditation, or at least you actually limited, unfortunately, the benefit that you could have got out of it again, Whether it's a good meditation or not, and from the standpoint of freedom is a question of whether I managed to remain spacious around the experience. Did I get hooked or didn't I get hooked? That's the difference.
Și aici, în practica noastră, ideea este de a menține această spațialitate, adică de a nu ne pierde meditația care a fost plăcută, unde, a fost o senzație plăcută în care m-am pierdut, sau de a da deoparte meditația care a fost poate puțin neplăcută. Atâta timp cât am menținut această spațialitate și această capacitate de a simți direct ambele experiențe, meditația a fost bună.
Finish, huh?